We are back after a week off. The Bomber Boys are back at you as we head into the stretch of the season. Dylan Price, Justin Chevalella with another iteration of everyone's favorite Yankee podcast. We got a lot to talk about since the last time that we got together. The Yankees, we wrote them off for dead, and then they beat up on some very subpar teams that are already eliminated from the postseason, and then shocked the world by doing what they seemingly can never do, winning in Houston and then beating Toronto. Seemed like things came back down to earth last night when the Tigers laid the whooping on them. But how can the Yankees bounce back? How are Justin and I feeling about the latest stretch? Well, we will share it with you. Plus, both our teams lost in week one, and I'm sure Justin's got thoughts on it. I am not necessarily as anti my team right now as I imagine Justin is, but we'll dive into that in short order before we get into any of it, because we got a lot to recap. Good sir, how are you?
I mean, I'm good now. You got me energized. That intro, you brought the energy, and I'm now feeding off of it. I'm a little sleepy on this Wednesday night. It's been a pretty, uneventful day for me sitting on my couch all day. But, now the Yankees have started. The game's on. You've got me hyped up. We're back here on Bomber Boys. And honestly, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
We are doing well. For those that don't know, a little peek behind the curtain here. I think this was intro number 3, and third time was the charm, baby, because we were ready this time around. A little shout out to another fellow Chevalella, I think, for just giving us the much needed laugh and encouragement before the third time was the charm. And yes, I do know that one's Daniel.
Yes, that was Daniel in the back.
Bang! We are ready. We are rolling. And we got a lot to talk about because this Yankees team was a rolling. They were moving and shaking before they had a little bit of a come to Jesus moment by hand of the Detroit Tigers. They're back in the Bronx after their beating up of sub 500 teams, but they've been in the Bronx. It just felt like this is the Yankees that are back. That's why I say the back in the Bronx thing rather. And I see Daniel behind you in the corner right now peering through. But I say back in the Bronx because last night felt like the Yankees that we wrote for dead a couple weeks ago when we last were together were back. But before that, it felt like the Yankees were kind of the team of old. They beat up on the 500 teams, which has become their staple this season, but they actually had some really impressive victories over the Astros and the Blue Jays that have them in striking distance of the American League East right now. But again, last night felt like the Yankees were back in the Bronx as they got belt to you-know-what by the Detroit Tigers. Just kind of, because we're recapping 2 weeks here, what are just some of your thoughts in the, I'm sure, very stockpiled brain of Justin Chevalella since we last did the show?
You have so much good, but you have so much bad. It's like, is there really a thought outside of this is just mediocrity at its finest being put on display day in and day out? You talk about taking 2 out of 3 from Houston and following that up with 2 out of 3 against Toronto, who had beaten you up all season long. To take those 2 wins, as much as it doesn't mean anything in terms of the fact that, Toronto's got the tiebreaker if things were to be tied up at the end of the year, but to take those 2 games, close the gap a little bit more, and then boom, you have a great opportunity last night. Will Warren goes out and shoves through 6 innings. You go to the bullpen, Fernando Cruz coming off the IL has been fantastic, and him and Mark Leiter can't record an out, and you let up 9 earned runs in that 7th inning, and you lose by 10 runs. And it's like, that's not supposed to happen for a playoff team, especially in September. If that were to happen in April, in May, in June, heck, even July and August, if that were to happen once in a while, that's fine. But you're in September, you're in late September at this point, I guess mid-September, but for the baseball season, you can consider this late September at this point with only a couple series left. You can't have that happen, what happened last night. So for me, that's the thought that occupies my mind, is it's just the same old mediocre Yankees. It's better than what we were seeing in July and early August and, late June with how bad they were, significantly under 500 over that stretch, but it's not as good as they were through April, through May, and through the beginning of June. That part is the concern, because you got to get hot going into the playoffs. And I believe the Yankees going into last night, they had the best record over the last 25 games in the MLB. I believe it was 17-8. It doesn't feel that way because those 17 wins have been, boring wins against bad teams. They're supposed to get those wins, but they haven't been the special wins, the walk-off wins, or, the big wins against big opponents. As much as you look at the series and taking 4 out of 6 against 2 playoff teams in Houston and Toronto, you didn't really have a big win in those series in terms of you absolutely crushed them or you held them scoreless, you shut them out, hit them through 6, whatever the case is. You can go off that and be like, there's no true statement win in that stretch that has you excited going into this final stretch of the season for the Yankees. And then you go and have a, horrible loss, not just a loss, a horrible loss. And it feels like all 8 over that last 25 games. And I guess it's now 17-9 over the last 26 after yesterday. It feels like those 9 have been heartbreaking losses, where a starter goes really good and the bullpen blows it, or starter's really good, but the hitters can't get anything going at the plate. It's been home run or bust for the Yankees. I believe now 62 home runs over the last 26, if I'm not mistaken, because I believe it was 60 over the last 25 going into yesterday. So it just feels like it's this back and forth that the Yankees are battling themselves. They have yet to have a true team effort through and through over an extended period of stretch. We've seen it at times. We've seen it a game or two here or there, but we haven't seen it just continuously ride out there where your starter goes 6, your bullpen can get the final 9 outs, and your hitters are providing big run support. And it feels like the Yankees need that before going into the postseason because, again, the hottest team, the team with the most momentum is the team that's going to go farthest in the postseason.
And I think that was the encouraging part. Like you just said it right there. This felt like for all the bad that we have seen really going back to the end of June, but really July into that just putrid 2-month span. And then the early part of August, it felt like, okay, you would trade that off, as weird as it sounds, for the fact that the Yankees were still in the mix and have then put together this 17-9 stretch that it's been. And you would trade that because this is the time of the year you want to see that happen. Maybe albeit a little bit early because you'd really love it to happen right at maybe that Astros series because you hope you didn't waste all the good wins against, the 2 teams that could be playing in AAA for the World Series there right now instead of in the majors. But I kind of digress, but then go back to it. It felt like to me, you and I at least were not overrating those wins, but it was funny to me how at least a lot of the Yankees fan base was actually rather jubilant, despite the fact that right before that series, Joel Sherman, right coming out of that Red Sox series, Joel Sherman had said, here's exactly what's going to happen again. They're going to lay belt to you-know-what on 2 sub-500 teams. They're going to just continue to clean up on that, stat pad a little bit, which they did all of those things. And then they're going to head into the legitimate competition again. But I was really encouraged by the performance in Houston and then coming back to the Bronx in that first series with Toronto, especially Toronto, because Toronto has really been a rough one this year. Houston had a rough start to the year, has figured it out, and will be a part of the postseason picture. But I think the funny part in it was that felt more for a team and for a venue in which they have struggled for so much of the better part of the last decade and half of decade, really, and, struggling to win in Houston, struggling to beat the Astros. I felt more, wow, this team might actually be kind of catching lightning in a bottle here after the Blue Jays series. And it's crazy, though, and just how quick the kind of switch could flip last night in that just throttling by the Tigers, because that was the Yankees of old again. That was the Yankees of the Boston series. That was the Yankees that you and I pretty much straight up said weren't really worth talking about. And obviously for a Yankees podcast, that's a little bit difficult, but it was kind of to that point where our frustration had hit its, peak, where we can't just keep sitting here talking about, them doing the usual Yankees standard of beating up on good teams and then losing, or beating up on bad teams and losing to the good ones. And that's where this season was going to be defined. But I do kind of then put some little bit of a backstep on what I just said about a lot of that trickled out last night after that loss. Tigers are the best team in the American League. If you haven't figured that out by now, you are not watching the same game of baseball that the rest of the fan base and the rest of Major League Baseball is. The Tigers are the best team in the American League. For as good of a team as the Blue Jays have been this year, for as cohesive, I was listening to their broadcaster talk on WFAN this afternoon, for as fun of a team as this is, cohesive of a unit, they don't have the same level of talent this Tigers team has. This Tigers team is tailor-made to, I kind of equate them to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Maybe they didn't get there in the past couple years, but this feels like the team that is young enough, talented enough to really hit its peak right at the right time and right into this postseason where they could run roughshod on the entire American League, because this does feel like, outside of Detroit, a winnable American League this year. Now, the Yankees haven't exactly proven that with their track record against these opponents, despite recently against Houston and Toronto. But there's a lot of things that we're going to break down, and one particular thing that we're going to break down after we talk of one of the big results from last night, that I think is going to just hold this team back. And I'll give my take on that when we get to it at that point. But the lineup has hit its stride at times, and you said it kind of perfectly. We haven't seen a complete joint team effort in this little run that they've been on here. We've seen guys step up. We've seen the big sleep look like he's going to get a massive contract in the offseason in Trent Grisham. And then we've seen guys just not even show up to the ballpark some days and quite literally be a hole in the lineup. So we haven't seen a joint team effort, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's, where they save for the postseason. But with the Yankees brand of baseball we've watched this year, that doesn't exactly fill with confidence. Starters have been fantastic. I think outside of a few blemishes we saw Schlittler come back down to life. We've seen Fried go deep into games, but not necessarily have his best stuff at points. But I think for me, the starters have been good. We've seen hitters step up even when others have had bad days. The unit that we'll talk about later in the show, just in a beat here, is why I think this could have been fool's gold, this little run the Yankees just went on. But before we go into me being negative for a change, I do want to be positive, which brings us to my new favorite segment that we do on this program, Judgmental Justin versus Positive Price, because the captain last night etched himself into the history books, passing Yogi Berra for sole possession of fifth place in the franchise's history for all-time home runs, and doing so at just such an impressive rate, such an impressive clip. And it feels like in due time, he's going to be able to track down some of the others on this list. Obviously, going to have a chance to pass DiMaggio very, very soon, but a good chance to even reel in Gehrig, I think, before his time is up. Well, while we kind of break down the accomplishment, I also want you to look at this in a 1,000-foot view here, a 10,000-foot, a 99,000-foot view, if you will. And I want you to kind of examine, Judgmental Justin, what you believe, because I know you've been ready for this as you kind of crack your back and get ready to go here. What do you think this does for Aaron Judge's legacy?
Well, first of all, I believe it was Jack Curry yesterday, or John Flaherty, or Bob Lorenz. One of the guys on the postgame show said, at times we should sit back and realize what we're watching. We've seen 359 home runs of Aaron Judge's career, and at times it doesn't feel like we've seen that many home runs. And I feel like, to start, we are seeing one of the greatest right-handed hitters of all time, one of the greatest hitters. I don't care what side of the plate he hits on. And we're certainly seeing arguably the best hitter of this current generation of baseball. And that I am more than willing, to go to die on the hill for lack of better terms, to go fight for, saying that Judge is probably the best hitter in baseball right now. And I think that still, beats Shohei Ohtani. And, Philly fans, we have a lot of friends that are Philly fans. They're celebrating Kyle Schwarber hitting 50 home runs last night. And I shrug my shoulders and go, why are you acting like it's anything big? That's commonplace around here with, watching Judge year in and year out. It's going to be a little difficult for him to get here this year, but I still think he's got the chance. I think he needs 6 more home runs over the final 17 and a half games for the Yankees as they're midway through this second game with Detroit. But I think when I take that step back and look at the legacy of Aaron Judge, you don't look at a Yankees legacy like you might look at somebody on the Angels. You might, Mike Trout, for example. He still could go down very well. Likely he'll go down as the greatest Angel of all time, and he's been injured the last 5 seasons when you think about it. For Aaron Judge, you have to compare him against some of the greatest, some of the most famous, some of the best baseball players that the sport has ever seen. You see the ticker going by. Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio, and Yogi Berra are the other names on this ticker, but that doesn't even include so many great Yankees. That doesn't include Jeter and Mariano and, CeCe and, Whitey Ford, right? I could just keep naming guys that come out for Old Timers Day and all that type of stuff, and they're great. And what is a Yankees legacy defined by? It's defined by winning. And what is the one thing Aaron Judge has not done in his career? It is win. So I had some fun today, throughout my day, and I decided to extrapolate the data for Aaron Judge's career. Judge has played in 81.37% of all the games the Yankees have played, regular season games the Yankees have played since he was called up on August 13th, 2016. So that's 1,127 games. I guess 1,128 with the game currently going on. He has 6 seasons and 18 games, or now 17 and a half games, left on his current contract with the Yankees, the one he signed a few seasons ago. 990 total games left for the Yankees. You take that 81% he's played in, he's playing in 805 more games as a Yankee. Obviously, if everything goes, to plan as the Yankees would like it. In that time, he would pace for 843 more hits, 256 more home runs, 581 more RBI. He would finish his career just over 2,000 hits at 2,024. He would finish his career with 615 career home runs and 1,395 runs batted in. He'd be 9th in Yankee history in hits, 2nd in Yankees history in home runs, only behind Ruth, and 6th in runs batted in behind Gehrig, Ruth, DiMaggio, Mantle, and Berra, right? That is impressive stuff. That is why we're talking about him, like I said, being the best hitter of this generation. Those numbers are unheard of, right? No offense to the guys that, Ruth and Mantle and Gehrig played for, but that argument in the NBA where, Jordan played against plumbers and LeBron's playing against these tough guys, or vice versa, depending on who you really ask. Well, you can kind of consider the same thing for baseball. And you also have to consider there was less teams back then. And that argument comes up because we're talking about rings. That's what measures a Yankees' true legacy. And as much as he'd finished 9th in hits, 2nd in home runs, 6th in runs batted in, we're looking at a guy that technically would be on pace for 0 rings the rest of his career because he's had none to this point. And, well, that's how the data extrapolates when you take it. Berra had 10 rings, DiMaggio 9, Ruth 4, Mantle 7, Gehrig 6, Jeter, Pettit, Mo, Posada, O'Neill, Cone. I mean, you can name these guys that can fill a hand with rings just from playing with the Yankees, not even with other teams. And to me, that is where Judge's legacy as a Yankee is tarnished. He needs to win, in my opinion, 2 or 3 World Series before this contract is up or before his Yankees career is over, because he could always extend, to even be considered in terms of the Yankees Mount Rushmore, because so many guys have won more than him. And it stinks to say, considering he's a better hitter than well, if his numbers continue out, he's a better hitter than Mantle, Gehrig, DiMaggio, Berra, Jeter, all these guys. But if you don't win as a Yankee, you can't be considered in the Yankees, Mount Rushmore. You can name guys who just happen to be around in 2009 and got a ring on their finger. You can name guys that were around whatever year and just happen to get one. And at this current pace, they will have one and Judge will have none. And he will be tied with, 1,000 other Yankees or whatever the number is that didn't get a ring. And to me, that is where Judge's legacy, as great as he's been, and as much as I'm willing to fight the Ohtani Judge fight, he doesn't have the resume, or he might not have the resume to be considered a top 5 Yankee of all time.
This feels like we're almost kind of foreshadowing an argument that we're going to have for over the course of the next, half of a decade. As you mentioned, 6 years.
I'm just glad that you want to continue this for a half a decade at least. That is great news on this Wednesday night.
I think that this is a conversation that it has a lot of layers. It's not one that I think we could have over the course of one Bomber Boys. I think we could probably dedicate a whole segment of the offseason to this, especially 5 years from now if we're still doing this podcast, and especially if he's still not won a World Series ring. I will actually give you your credit right off the bat. Normally I wait and sprinkle it in halfway through. First off, extrapolating those stats and then projecting what could happen in the future. Great job on your end. That's impressive. I give you a lot of credit. I'll also add that I think you're right on the World Series thing right off the bat. I think that's a hard argument to beat. And I also think that there's a lot of truth in how he would be viewed by Yankees fans if he doesn't win a World Series in his tenure with the Yankees. And I'll even do you one better to even help your argument. He could be one of those guys. You said 2009. There were some guys who just kind of got lucky that they were there. Obviously, not true. They played a pivotal part of winning a World Series, but they weren't there for the long haul. Judge could be that guy who was there for the long haul, but gets lucky that the tides turn at the perfect time and the Yankees decide that they're going to, push all their, chips to the center of the table and go for it one year, that they build their version of the Dodgers and build the Avengers out in the Bronx. That could happen, and it could happen well past Judge's prime. It could happen at the tail end of Judge's prime, and it could definitely happen at the tail end of his captaincy. So I think that that's something that I would even help enhance your case with, that we are looking at the prime of one of the greatest hitters that we will ever watch in our lifetime, and we haven't seen him win a World Series yet. Now, where I push back on you and his individual legacy is that I think a lot of at least the early part of Judge, and then especially this most recent part of Judge, has been first and foremost, the early part of Judge would be an indictment on the front office, indictment on a lot of things going on, of just not recognizing the fact that you had one of the most superb talents in the game of baseball and you weren't doing anything to build around it. Now, 2 years ago, they go out, trade for Juan Soto that offseason, and that felt like pushing your chips to the middle of the table. And they have made moves that have made you go, okay, they're cognitive of the fact that Judge isn't going to play forever. Now, this season, and the way this season's been with the moves that Boone has made and refusing to bench certain guys, mismanagement of the bullpen, and you could kind of extrapolate those decisions, all those little decisions that have cost the Yankees games, potentially a World Series last year, and cost the Yankees further opportunities to go longer into the postseason in previous years, that all could help actually Judge's legacy. Because when you look at his legacy, it certainly has a gray cloud over it because of the management of the front office at points in his tenure, and also the management of the manager at points in his tenure. Now, another case that you could make against Judge is his performance in the postseason. I think what he's done in his 162s to get to his 10s, his 20s that he plays in the postseason is a lot more imperative to the Yankees' success than what he does in a very small sample size. Do we all want to see Judge play a hell of a lot better if they make it to October this year, which in all likelihood they should? It would take almost a collapse of epic proportions at this point for them not to.
It is the 2025 Yankees, though.
True, exactly. Now, if we all want to see him play better, and this could be the perfect run for him to really signify that he is the guy and one of the guys of all time, because this team is not as maybe they are, and I think we've both said this all season, so I'm going to push back on what I was about to say. They are more talented than the team that played in the World Series a year ago. They are a deeper team. I think they are a more well-rounded team and a team that is more well-positioned to make a deep run into late October. Now, where I'll kind of go against that is this is a team that has not played like a more talented team, a more well-rounded team, and like a team that looks like they're going to play deep into October. In fact, for a couple weeks ago, we didn't know if they'd even play beyond September. So as it stands with this Yankees, this could be the perfect year for him to really signify the kind of greatness that he has brought to this team, because he might have to elevate the guys around him in a way that he has never had to do before, because if the way they have played in small sample sizes at points this season, and then as they've collectively all struggled at points this season, comes to play in October, they're not going to make it very far if number 99 doesn't play some of the best baseball of his career. Now, from a talent standpoint, as you just mentioned, the history standpoint of what he could bring to the table to further his candidacy and what he's already done, he's a future Hall of Famer. I don't think many people are going to push back on that. One stat that I found when I was digging up on this is in all the games the Judge has played for the New York Yankees. So heading into tonight, that was well over 1,500 games he has played for, or well over almost 1,100 games he's played for the Yankees. Sorry, I did quick math on the other
1,127, according to my math earlier.
Thanks, Justin. It's 27. There we go. That's a good sign. 359 home runs Judges hit in that time span. 1,778 home runs have been hit by the Yankees in that same time span. He has hit 20% of the Yankees' home runs in this time span. He is one of the greatest power hitters we have seen in the modern era. And just for that alone, he's going to already have himself on a hell of a runway to a Hall of Fame plaque. He's also a 2-time most valuable player, should have been 3-time, could even make the case this year it should be 4 times, but that's a debate for another day that we've already had on this program. A Rookie of the Year, a Home Run Derby champ, a 7-time All-Star, and that list is only going to continue to grow. His accolades will get longer. I don't think this is an argument of whether or not he's going to get into the Hall of Fame. I think we all agree on that already. And we both already acknowledge the fact that he's one of the greatest hitters of the modern era. I think people will remember him the same way that if he doesn't win a World Series, people remember Mike Trout as one of the best talents that we have seen, laid eyes on in our lifetime. But unfortunately, you look at their history, the World Series, they never got over that hump. And that's unfortunate, especially for us as Yankees fans, but also as two people who like Mike Trout and have talked about him before. But sometimes the biggest blemish on a resume is ultimately the fact that you didn't have a ring. And if that doesn't happen for Aaron Judge, I kind of agree with you. It could certainly hurt his legacy within the Yankees. But as we talk about all-time greats, we are watching one of, I believe, three right now who will always be remembered as synonymous with this era of baseball. And for me, that's Trout, that's Judge, and that's Ohtani as the three greats of the game right now. But for the Yankees, I agree with you to an extent. He's got to get one of those if he wants to make it on the Mount Rushmore in any way, or make even a push for the Mount Rushmore in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right, because I'm looking at it maybe more in that, out there, the World Series, but he's a Hall of Famer. And that alone, being a Hall of Famer in pinstripes, puts you, arguably top 10. And his stats do the same. We do want to see him perform in the postseason. You're right on that part too. But at the same time, you said it best. His 162 can count for itself, right? Like it can fight for itself in terms of his legacy, because half the time the Yankees have gone quiet. And you brought up the 20% of the Yankees home runs over that stretch have been hit by him. He carries this team more times than not to even get into October. And sure, he might struggle when the lights are brightest, but also you'd have to imagine, I think the Yankees have only missed the playoffs one or twice in his career, 2016, and then the year he was injured. So when you really think about it, and they may have made it in 16, I don't think they did though. When you think about it, I mean, he's going to make the postseason likely the next, this year and then the 6 to follow. So he's got the chance to prove himself in the postseason as well. And it should be fun. Hopefully he does finally get something going with more experience now in postseason play. I think you brought up another great point. At times, the Yankees have done him well. They went out and got Garrett Cole. They went out and got Carlos Rodon. They've, got Soto that year. They got Bellinger this year. Obviously, we're still waiting to see how this year plays out. They went and got Jazz last year. And obviously, the trade deadline acquisitions, which have been honestly awful for the Yankees this year outside of Bednar, they've gone out and they've made the moves. But at the same time, they haven't made every right move. And they have left him out to dry more times than not. Took a couple years before they got a good starting pitcher in Cole to come over and headline the staff. And then, I mean, you can talk about it. His Yankee legacy is to a point where it can only go as high up as Aaron Boone's legacy with the Yankees is going to go, because Aaron Boone holds back this team. Aaron Boone decided to pitch Nestor Cortez for the first time in 30 days, last year in game 1 against the Dodgers and serve up the grand slam instead of Tim Hill, who was one of the best pitchers in the postseason. And sure, Judge's Yankee legacy will always be greater than Aaron Boone, but they kind of work together to the point maybe Judge is here and Boone's here right now. Boone can climb here, but that would only allow Judge to climb to here, right? If they win the World Series. They're at a point where Judge has separated himself a lot from Boone, but they still work up together and they progress together. And it's almost unfair to put Judge's legacy in a manager who, you and I have said it plenty of times, seems to be incompetent, especially to run the New York Yankees. Now, if he was running the Pittsburgh Pirates, maybe it's a different story. But, I mean, yes, Judge has cemented himself as one of the greatest hitters of all time. And, I mean, if something were to happen to him over the next couple of years and he doesn't, do what those numbers say, and let's be real, he's probably going to regress a little bit as he gets older. But, I mean, he's still at 359 home runs really quick. He's still top 5 in Yankee history, broke the top 5's, order for the first time since whatever that year is on the bottom. It's been the same top 5 since 57. I mean, there are so many good things Judge has done, and we will always talk about what Aaron Judge is to the New York Yankees, and he will be cemented in Monument Park. That 99 jersey will never be worn again, and that we can certainly say. So his legacy is there. He's done a pretty darn good job in his first, I keep wanting to say few seasons, but he's been around for quite some time at this point. And it's only now a matter of trying to put the finishing touches on. And I wanted to ask this. If Judge gets, a couple of World Series, let's say Judge wins 2.
Now you're just getting greedy here.
Let's say Judge wins 2.
Okay.
But let's say one of them comes like this year or next year when he's still in the prime. But the second one comes when the next, round of talent, next wave of talent comes for the Yankees. So really that one is, let's just say, George Lombard's World Series. He's the guy that's leading the Yankees to it, which I know I'm throwing stuff out there.
I love it. I want some more of it.
I'm trying to put positive vibes out there. Where does that put Judge if he gets one, let's say, on his own? I know there's other guys, and I know, they're kind of all in that towards the end of their prime, but still in the prime. But getting that second one, do you put him top 4? Because Mount Rushmore's only got 4 spots. You'd love to have a 5th to put him in. But if he gets one on his own and one on, let's say, Lombard's Yankees, is that enough to put him on Mount Rushmore? With the numbers being what the numbers said they were when I did the calculations this morning.
2-time World Series champ, captain, probably at that point, a dozen All-Star appearances, probably 4 or 5 MVPs, second in home runs all time. He's certainly top 6, top 7. I don't know if he's there. And I think it would really have to be see how those World Series are won. You know what I think, honestly, the proof would be in the pudding in? He could win that second World Series, or win that first World Series, but if it's on the backs of Giancarlo Stanton, Cody Bellinger, the big sleep and Jazz, and not necessarily a performance from him, and then another World Series where maybe he has the clutch home run like we saw maybe from Giancarlo last year, those kind of that run that we saw from him, maybe then things would have to kind of almost really change for him to get into that top 4. I think it would put him certainly in the top 6, but I think what he does to get those rings is almost more important to this conversation than whether or not he gets them at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely fair. If he hits, if he's on the IL all year, but gets the ring, that's different than if he hits 60 home runs in the regular season and another, 7 in the postseason and hits the World Series. That, if you saw me, with my arm up, I'm hanging a Post-it note on my wall here. That reminds me of an off-season conversation we should have about the top 5 Yankees as they stand right now, because I think there's a lot of debate probably that could be had there. That being said, finish off by just saying Aaron Judge is fun to watch. What I believe Jack Curry said yesterday is right. Maybe we should take a step back. Maybe coming up here today after he goes 5th all time with the Yankees home run wasn't the right thing to start discussing not having World Series ring. But it was a conversation that was going to be had regardless, and I was itching for it, right? I wanted to have.
And I do feel like it's something that you knew your audience in the regard of me, outside of those obviously hanging with us and watching and listening. But I think you knew your audience, and you knew that would be enough to poke the bear to get me to have to think about it a little bit more. I think it's a conversation we could trail into the offseason, but I like it. I think it was a conversation that's worth having. I think we've both seen opposite sides of that for some time. This is actually probably the first time we've seen in the middle on how it could pan out. For you and I in that regard. One other thing I'll say before we get into our next conversation, I feel like every time I look at Baseball Reference to look at Judge's stats and look at anything, I feel like he gets older. I feel like every time I look, there's like a year or two added to it. And I'm not saying that because I haven't looked in a year or 2 years. I'm saying that like in my brain, Judge is still 30, 31, and I just looked, he's 33. And that kind of makes your regression point all the more pivotal to the conversation.
In my brain, he got called up 2 years ago.
Okay, so you and I have not been watching this brand of Yankees baseball because I think this brand of baseball has aged me about 5 years since then. But anyways, I digress. Speaking of this brand of baseball, Boone, it's your time to be brought to the table on Bomber Boys. This is a conversation we've been having off air. This is a conversation that we've had on air quite a bit. We had it before the deadline when they went out and added David Bednar, who looks like he's going to be the next jersey I would have purchased as long as he stays with the team for the long, long haul. Camilo Duvall, who has definitely brought the fire at times and also brought the water to put out that fire. And Jake Bird, who Bird, I guess, wasn't the word. But as we take a what?
I thought I had the stat. I was looking for the stat, his ERA in the minors, because it seems like he hasn't even done better down there.
We haven't heard about it, unfortunately.
Seems like Jake Bird may have been a guy that the Yankees get and just kind of like Scott Efris rots down in the minors for a while.
But anyways.
Not a good look. That's what I'm seeing. I'll get the exact stats in a second.
Okay. But as it pertained to the bullpen conversation, we had it after Fernando Cruz, funny enough, got hurt. Not funny enough, but that was really the first catalyst to that conversation being driven to this topic or to the table here. All right, what's his ERA? Because I've been waiting. I can't even get words out properly. What's it at?
He has pitched 11 games in the minors, and he has a 7.15 ERA
Okay, so that kind of
over that
punctuates my
stretch.
point. The bullpen was a topic before the deadline. It's certainly been one in the month and a half or so that's passed since, especially after they made their hell of a Yankees debut that we'll never forget, allowing 9 earned in their debut. But it really brings to a bigger conversation. Is it Aaron Boone's mismanagement of the current tools he has in his toolbox, or are some of those tools a little rusty, a little funky, and not necessarily the right ones to have in the arsenal right now? So I'll throw it to you first here. You see the ticker below with some of the stats where the Yankees rank. Especially, I like that one right there. Since July 1st, ranked 29th in Major League Baseball with a 5.48 ERA. So is it the bullpen? Is it the tools in the toolbox? Or is it Handy Mandy, or otherwise known as Aaron Boone, using them? Did you watch that show as a kid?
Which one? Bob the
Handy
Builder?
Mandy?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I've
Anyways,
never even heard of it. Do
all
we
right,
live in different never mind.
I'll send you that later.
To be honest, it's both. But to me, I think more of it's got to fall on Boone. Let me first give you some more stats. Since July 1st, here are the ERAs of the New York Yankees. Bednar, 270. Luke Weaver, 413. Mark Leiter Jr., 794. Devin Williams, 646. Tim Hill, 351. This is since July 1st. JT Brubaker, who's no longer on the roster, a 142 ERA. Jonathan Loizaga, who's now injured, 506. Yeri De Los Santos, 517. Camilo Doval, 497. Those are guys that pitched at least 10 innings since July 1st. What that screams to me is there's a little bit of both. And part of it that you don't see looking at ERA is when they come in or how long they're left out there. Last night was a perfect example. You had Mark in the bullpen, and it turns out Mark Leiter wasn't any better last night, but Fernando Cruz has a bases loaded. The first 3 batters he faces, double walk. Take him out. Why are you leaving a guy in that just loaded the bases uncompetitively too? I mean, his pitches were missing bad. Wild pitches thrown into that inning as well. No outs, bases loaded, and you decide to leave him out there. And then he starts to struggle even more and lets a couple of those runs come in. And then you go, all right, Mark, it's time for you to come in. And what does Mark do? Makes it even worse. Maybe because the Yankees had already let up 4 runs by the time he came in, or 3 runs, whatever it was. It doesn't matter. That was an example of Aaron Boone failing, and both yesterday. Fernando Cruz was bad, but Aaron Boone didn't help him. You clearly saw a guy that didn't have his splitter, his best pitch, early on. His first one was bounced up to the plate, if I'm not mistaken, and you thought it would be a good idea to pitch him to more than 3 batters. What are you doing there? Both were the problem last night. Let's talk about the Devin Williams issue. I think this is where it is most prominent, right? Or I guess the best way to look at it, the best example of it. Devin Williams has been great in the 5th, 6th, sometimes even the 7th inning. But Aaron Boone keeps running him out there in the 8th inning, in the 9th inning, in a tie ball game, in a 1-run game, where he's clearly shown lately, and by lately I mean over the last month and a half, that he can't pitch in those situations. And you keep running him out there for no reason. You got other guys to run out there, even if they're doing bad too. And it's like, what are you doing? You know Devin Williams cannot be a high leverage guy. And let's just keep pitching him in high leverage situations. And it's frustrating because at that time, you and I have said it off air, on air. We know that everyone was calling for Devin Williams to get DFA'd or cut. That was never going to happen. But you can find a role where he doesn't have to save games. And Aaron Boone kept pitching him in situations, it keeps pitching him in situations where you got to save games. Same thing with Camilo Doval. Camilo Doval has come over and he can't have his high leverage stuff right now. Innings. And I know that sucks because you need more guys that can do better in high leverage. But that's Luke Weaver's job right now. I think he's looked okay. I don't think he's looked great. He's a guy that I think it's more skill or more on him than it is on Boone. Right? I think Doval and Williams right now need to find confidence elsewhere, but Aaron Boone won't let them. I think those guys are on Boone. I think Fernando's Cruz last night, that's more on Boone. Mark Leiter, especially last night, was on Boone. Luke Weaver struggling lately, that's on Luke Weaver. I think his fastball hasn't necessarily been there. I think his pitch selection has been a little off. There is both a talent issue in this bullpen and an Aaron Boone issue. And what it really, my question is, I don't know as much about this, and I'm not going to sit here and acting like I do, But you hear David Cohn talk about it on broadcast. You hear Girardi talk about it. Even Paul O'Neill, the hitter, talks about it. You see people on Twitter bringing on the stats. You have guys that succeeded by throwing, let's say, Camilo Doval in his sinker or, Luke Weaver in his fastball. And all of a sudden, for whatever reason, the Yankees aren't having those guys throw those pitches as much. It was the same problem with Max Fried over the last couple of months. His pitch distribution was completely off than what it was. And you can maybe blame his blister, but his blister seemed healed, and it was still going on. So to me, this is a bigger fundamental organization flaw than it is about the bullpen. And what stinks is now with the, pitch comm, I feel like pitchers are less likely to shake off pitches. It feels like when they were just throwing down a finger, it was easier. But now, between the pitch comm and the pitch clock, you're less likely to see a pitcher shake off multiple pitches to get the one he wants. And we saw Devin Williams start calling his own pitches, and that's now blown up. But for a while, it was good. But then his pitch distribution changed as well. So it's Boone and Blake. Let's not not blame Matt Blake here, the pitching coach. Boone and Blake, I think, have more blame right now than the bullpen. That being said, what the bullpen has put out there time and time again hasn't been pretty. And I don't think all of it can fall on those two. Look at the, stats right there. The ERA, the 24th in baseball with 31 bullpen losses. That's fine if you have 40 bullpen wins, but you're 26 with 23 bullpen wins. Your bullpen, the problem is your bullpen is deciding too many games. And I know that tends to happen throughout a long season, but in the postseason, you can't leave, or you're going to have to leave it up to these guys rather to make these, big moments, make something happen, get that strikeout. You're leaving too much in their hands right now. And I feel like part of the problem is fatigue. I think you overpitched them because the starters were getting pulled early. I fully believe Will Warren was pulled early last night. And I believe he was at 91 or 93 pitches. Pitch him to 100. 7 more pitches could be 2 more outs. Heck, it could be 3 more outs. And he was cruising. Pitch him on a batter-to-batter basis. But you have too many young guys in that rotation, obviously speaking of Warren and Schlittler, that you're not allowing to really go out there and go deep. And I know sometimes it's on their own accord, but yesterday, what's another 7 pitches to get to 100? Not much, probably another out or 2. And then you don't see Cruz blow up. And even tonight, Rodon just got the handshake after, I believe, 5 innings. You have tired your bullpen out. And that is a recipe for disaster more so than success.
I think first thing on
correction, it was Rodon went 6. I'm going to correct myself.
But one thing for the starters there's a reason I mentioned that in the intro when I kind of teased our bullpen talk is that I think the best run we've seen from the starters has come in this last stretch, and that's with Max Fried not playing his best baseball. We have not seen him do that since the first part of the season, and instead we've seen Cam Schlittler look like he's the next guy in this team, and that is with his inning and 2/3 kind of first blemish on the resume that came most recently. We've seen Will Warren all but earn himself a spot on next year's team. Luis Gil, to me, does still not look like Luis Gil, and he's still been effective and been able to get the Yankees some valuable innings. Rodon in this run the Yankees have put together here, first when they were really playing bad and then now into this good stretch, he has been one of the most effective starters in Major League Baseball. Max Fried has not pitched his best and still would be a front-of-the-line starter for a lot of teams right now. They have collectively, despite losing Clark Schmidt and, of course, Garrett Cole for the season, still look like one of the best 5, 6, 7, 8 baseball rotations we have seen. They have been that good in this run here. And really, holistically on the season, they have put together a damn good season for, at some point this season, Ryan Yarbrough was starting games for this team. Now, he did a pretty good job, by the way. But I do want to say that, first and foremost, that this isn't a bullpen that has been overworked. This isn't a bullpen that has been really just trotted out there to do a lot of games where you have an opener and everybody's getting utilized, and some days they just get shelled. No, this is a bullpen that has come in a lot of 7th, 8th, 9th, high leverage situations, just tasked with getting 9 outs, and they haven't been able to do that. In some games, they have been out front by 2-3 runs, and they haven't been able to do that. This is a bullpen that has played with its prey far too many times this season. This is a bullpen that has put pretty big investments into guys who don't feel like they're going to be long-term Yankees. I'm looking at you, Devin Williams, who has kind of course corrected a little bit in this past run. But then you talk about a guy like Camilo Doval, who I was ecstatic about. I think there was a portion of the Yankees fan base that might have been more excited about him than Bednar. And then, of course, you talk about some of the other guys here. Fernando Cruz was the kind of kickstart of this bullpen downhill slide. When he got hurt, the Yankees bullpen tanked. He was pitching some of the best baseball of his career. Mark Leiter Jr. is a guy people have had a lot of patience with, and yet he has not pitched very well in this last stretch here. And to me, yes, that spells that there is guys in this bullpen that really might not fit in a lot of major league bullpens. But I don't necessarily think that's the case with the current kind of cast of characters the Yankees have. I think this truly is, first and foremost, Matt Blake, not, as you said, almost perfectly, not allowing them to use the pitches that have made them calling cards in Major League Baseball for so long, but also it's the situations in which Boone has decided to pull starters when they have been in pretty good situations, pitch count-wise and in terms of momentum. And it's also putting guys in at times you certainly shouldn't be putting them in. Half these bullpen losses really feel like they were caused at that really peak time by Devin Williams being trotted out there when he did not have his best stuff, or Luke Weaver being trotted out there when he was just coming back from injury, or overusing other guys, or putting guys out there who, for a reason, are not supposed to be in the 7th, 8th, 9th. These are guys who should be lucky enough to be on a team right now that's contending for a top postseason slot as 6th inning guys, occasional 7th inning, maybe an 8th, 9th if it's a blowout. But I think the utilization of guys, the utilization of the tools in the toolbox has been, in my opinion, a bigger issue than the cast of characters, because post the deadline, you've got guys who've got chops. It is really a slim doubt in my mind that Camilo Doval or Devin Williams can go to another team and won't have success. I think they will. Look at Aroldis Chapman right now. He looks like one of the best pitchers in baseball again. His career resurgence needs to be studied. And so I think that that's something to be said in that regard. And I'll use an analogy here because I'm a big wrestling fan, as you know. There are WWE wrestlers who can out-talk you and I every day of the week and twice on Sundays, and they are being forced to read pre-done scripts like this that they've got written on their hands saying, I'm the toughest guy in the WWE, when realistically you could give them a mic and they'd go out there and cut a promo that would go viral on social media 10 days of the week and twice on Tuesdays. I know there's not 10 days in the week, but that's how damn good some guys are on the mic. My point is that sometimes if you don't let people do what they're best at, they're not going to put the same performance out there. Just because you write the script for them, just because you tell them what pitches to throw and they don't do it effectively, doesn't mean it. If they're not picking their best move, their best arsenal, if they're not shaking off signs, whatever it may be, if you're not letting the guys that you brought in do their job to the fullest of their extent, then you shouldn't be surprised that this bullpen ranks 29th in baseball with a 5.48 ERA since July 1st, despite going out at the trade deadline and getting two pieces into the fold who were expected to shift that statistic. This is a cast of characters that has gotten a lot better, but for a while was placed out of the bargain bin that you'd see in a Walmart of the $2.99 movies that were made in 2000 on a $20 budget. The reality is that the Yankees have upgraded the bullpen, but the result and the management of the bullpen has been the same. And to me, that spells Boone. And actually, to an extent, the pitching savant, I think that kind of also spells Matt Blake.
And what about some of the other decisions? I mean, you look at some guys in the minors, and it seems, based off what I can tell on the MILB site, is that Ian Hamilton had gotten hot. It seems like he had one or maybe two rough up over his last 7, but prior to that, he was doing exceptional. And instead, you're taking up a roster spot with Paul Blackburn, who, all things considered, has done a really nice job. But Hamilton's a guy that's pitched in big leverage. And I know he struggled right before he got sent down, but sometimes that's all you need to get called back up. Yerry De Los Santos has been one of the most consistent major league pitchers, and you have him in the minors right now. Mind you, the rosters are expanded to 28 right now, but you're too concerned about some guys and if we cut this guy or we try to option him, he's going to be claimed. Well, some of them just suck and should be. And I'm sorry, because Paul Blackburn's actually been okay, but at the same time, he's not a guy that should be a major league pitcher. I know he's there at the end of games, just kind of eat like the blowout yesterday. And when I was at the Yankee game a couple weeks ago, it was the same story, but Hamilton would provide more for this team. Yerry De Los Santos would most certainly provide more for this team. And I think, even one step further, let's look at some other, situations. Luke Weaver had an opportunity last week to go 2 innings. They wouldn't pitch him 2 innings. And they blew the game. I can't remember off the top of my head which game it is, but I remember watching it and thinking I'd leave Weaver out there for another inning. Yankees blew the game. The one guy that feels consistently good right now is David Bednar, and it's been hold your breath at times with David Bednar, but he's pitching just like he was in Pittsburgh. He hasn't changed a damn thing about his approach. His energy is the exact same, and it's great to see. And I'm watching a Yankee game right here to my right now in the 7th inning down 2-0. And I know the offense has been dormant, but they're pitching Mark Leiter for the 2nd straight game. Luke Weaver was warming 5 minutes ago when you were mid, on your part. I watched Luke Weaver in the bullpen, and you're telling me Mark Leiter's the best option tonight. And maybe Mark Leiter's going to pitch a scoreless inning or two right now and prove me wrong. But did you not see what he did last night? That's the other problem. The Yankees have no accountability for anything that goes wrong. Williams can go out there in the 7th, 8th, 9th, no matter how many damn times he blows it. Same thing with Camilo Doval. And I think Doval's still got good stuff. I just feel like he's being hit a little harder than he should be. But he's been able to go out there whenever. Mark Leiter tonight, leadoff single here in the 7th after a horrible night last night. And a horrible last couple. I think he's allowed runs in 4 of his last 5 after last night. And he can keep going out there in big moments. 2-0. This game's a swing of the bat away from being tied. And the 7th innings where it blew up yesterday in a 2-2 game, it became 10-2 pretty quick, or 11-2, whatever it was, 11-2 after the 7th. And it could just be like that again tonight because you're making the same damn mistake time and time again. And I just think a lot of it, look, Doval's now in the bullpen. This is an opportunity in the 7th where it's not too, it's not the Yankees need to hold on, where Doval's actually been pitching well. When the Yankees are losing, he's actually been, able to keep that deficit the same. Back-to-back singles for the Tigers to lead off this inning because you put Mark Leiter out there. As much as I want to, sit here and say that the bullpen's been the problem, it seems like a lot of it is Boone. And the problem is Boone won't have to take any accountability either because it's the damn analytics say to do this and do that and do that every time. There's something wrong with the Yankees. I digress.
Because this will chill you out. Anyways, on the backs of one in my opinion, most heated of Justin rants of all time, you want to take a break from the Yanks or you want to save this? For those that are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, I put the pinstripe panic meter graphic.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's do this and then get to the final segment of playoff push because maybe
you might as well get it out. So given that the NFL season kicked off this past week, although we are in the stretch of baseball, we have talked already for over 50 minutes about the Yankees today, and we figured it would be good to give it a little bit of a break given that the football season started. First and foremost, if you're a college football fan and college football savant, go check out Locks and Long Shots, a new college football podcast that at this point is from the Justin Chevalier and Dylan Price podcast network, because 1 half actually of this podcast is on that podcast with Josh Bartos.
No. Not 1/2 of this podcast. This podcast is 1/2 of that podcast.
It's been a long day, dude.
You got it. I'm just here to help. I'm here to help.
The Bomber Boys join Josh and Thomas for Locks and Long Shots. You can hear our picks for the college football weeks, our recaps, our rankings of how we see things panning out. Highly recommend you go check that out if you are also a college football fan. NFL season, though, kicked off this past week. Week 1 is in the books, and it was a really great week of football action as a whole of the teams in New York. Well, Buffalo won in thrilling fashion. So if you like
insane game
and you're a Bills fan, you watched what was probably already a candidate for game of the year, and the Buffalo Bills. Nobody circles the wagon like the Buffalo Bills won in week 1. They were the only team, though, from New York, as the New York Jets fell in a really great game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'll start with you because you already heard a little bit of a hint of how I feel about the contest because, well, it wasn't necessarily that same great performance for the G-Men. For those that don't know, Justin's a Giants fan. I'm a Jets fan. So we'll tee it up here first and foremost to you, good sir. What on the panic meter, 1 to 10, where do you have the Giants?
The problem is I'm numb to this feeling at this point with the Giants because they made the playoffs in 2022 on a weird year that we all thought Brian Daboll was the savior of the New York Giants. He made Daniel Jones look good. We all know what happened after that. They don't pay Saquon. They pay Daniel Jones. Neither are on the team anymore. Saquon's succeeding in Philadelphia, winning, a Super Bowl, and Daniel Jones has one heck of a first outing with Indianapolis, almost like we never saw that in New York. And we're stuck with Brian Daboll still. And I don't think it's all on him at this point, because what I watched on Sunday was a roster construction problem. The offensive line, they decided not to address in the offseason, which is incredible considering how bad it was last year. They weren't able to establish a run game over the weekend. The leading rusher was Russell Wilson, the quarterback, who shouldn't even be the starting quarterback on this team. Tyrone Tracy, the second-year guy out of Purdue, 10 carries, 24 yards. Devin Singleton, 3 carries, 9 yards. Cam Scatterbo, 2 carries, -3 yards. The offensive line couldn't hold anything. And honestly, the receivers don't help. Neighbors had 12 targets but 5 catches. And I don't think, those 7 mishaps are really on him. But stats will say that, obviously they didn't complete the pass. Wan'Dale Robinson had another good game. The tight end room is basically nothing. I mean, it's just everything seems like it's bad for the New York Giants. Defense looked okay, but Shane Bowen, the defensive coordinator, I mean, he wouldn't play that top unit of defensive guys together. The Abdul Carter, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, he would not play those 4 out there on the field at the same time. And that's a concern because those are the guys. The defensive line is supposed to be the strength of this team, and they're not out there together. And I think part of the reason that, got them mixed up a little bit was Micah McFadden, the linebacker's injury. Secondary didn't look good. Jevon Holland, who was your star, signing, the safety, came over from Miami. I believe the PFF grade for him in coverage was a 41.8, which that's out of 100. So you can do the math there and see how that went. Seemed like nothing could go right, and I'm just going to say it because I've said it all along. Jackson Dart should be the starting quarterback of this franchise. And I'm sorry, because I think Russell Wilson might have a little bit left in his tank. He's got something left in a tank behind an actual offensive line. Jackson Dart's a younger guy, more mobile. And, I mean, just look at the two. I know it's the preseason, and I put too much hype into it a lot. But look at how differently the offense ran with Dart than it is to Wilson. They run a completely different scheme. And the scheme with Wilson's not going to work with this offensive line. And I know Andrew Thomas isn't back yet, but he's been a liability. He's just as injury prone as anyone else in the league at this point. Jackson Dart should start. Throw him to the Wolves. If you're Brian Daboll, you want Dart because you're playing for your job. Same thing with Joe Shane, the general manager. Dart's got to be the starter. And they're not going to start him against the Cowboys, but within 4 weeks, Jackson Dart will, I'm not saying should, he will be the starter of this team. And I think it probably coincides with when Andrew Thomas returns from his foot injury, so they at least have a little bit more protection. But I will go out and I will argue right now that you will see a completely different football team with a completely different energy the moment Jackson Dart takes over. Because everyone can see how Brian Daboll is all buddy-buddy with Jackson Dart. And not in a way with that, like Aaron Boone and Anthony Volpe, where Boone continues to throw him out there nonstop. No. Brian Daboll loves Jackson Dart. And Brian Daboll is excited for the opportunity. But before they went and got Jackson Dart, they had to sign Russell Wilson for whatever reason. And that's got it all thrown off. So please, for the love of Giants fans, for a franchise that's been miserable since that boat trip on the off week between the playoffs, let Jackson Dart start. Please, I want to watch a good football team. That's all I ask. Panic meter? Oh. I'm gonna go a 9. This team's got nothing. You're trending right towards the first overall pick again. And honestly, Dart should start. That's what I'm saying. Dart should start. Help me out. You had fun. I was happy to see that, the Jets could put up points for once, and they still lost.
Happy because they were playing the Steelers, and Josh and Dom were in misery for a day.
Well, and
for a little while there, at least.
And the fact that they still lost, but they at least looked, like a football team. I'm happy you got to watch a football team, and I'd like to watch a football team too, an NFL team, not a high school team. I'd like to watch that as a Giants fan, because the Giants, no offense to the Jets, the Giants are the premier organization in New York. compared to the Jets.
Like Sunday.
Same way the Yankees are to the Mets. Same way the Yankees are to the Mets, but haven't looked like it with their spending lately. Anyway, that's all I got to say. Start Dart, or else this season's 0-17.
Or else Justin is going to the Meadowlands with a pitchfork and a flaming torch at this point, because
Why would I give him my money? They gave away a small Pepsi for Fan Appreciation Day 2 years ago. A small Pepsi worth probably $7.99 because prices are outrageous. I digress.
Thank you, man, I guess, out there. Anyways, my team looks great. I'm ecstatic. Fields looks like he's the answer. Garrett looks like a top 4 receiver in all of football again. Offensive line,
my fantasy team.
Offensive line looks like they could block every single top-tier pass rusher in the NFL. Sauce looks like Sauce. We don't talk about the rest of the secondary. Offensive line, like I said, double down, looked fantastic. Aaron Glenn is the greatest coach of all time. I don't know what else you want to hear. I am ecstatic about the future of this team. They still lost the football game. Xavier Gibson got cut, though, and don't ever want to wish any ill will on anybody. But he was smirking in the locker room after that fumble. That guy already knew it was coming, unfortunately. Do wish him the best. Guy's a freak talent, and what you got to watch on Hard Knocks seems to be legit. The guy's a top-tier character guy as well. Aaron Glenn did look great. Tanner Angstrand, the new offensive coordinator, the play calling was great. Chris Banjo, special teams looked good. Pretty much everything about Sunday was some of the most fun Jets football I've watched in some time. The only negative side was they lost, and Aaron Rodgers won, and Karen Rodgers was celebrating as he ran off the field. So that was really the only downside. Quincy Williams popping Aaron Rodgers so hard I thought he cracked his rib was one of the watching the Jets defense celebrate. Clearly, there's nobody left in that locker room that is really hoping for 8-ball to come back. So it does feel like, despite the fact that was a painful ending to the game, watching them hang with a team I thought that would hang 14, or they beat them by like 14 points. I was pretty impressed with the performance. It's like a 4-1 for me. Do I still think this is a postseason team? Probably not. But do I finally feel like I am going to make Sunday viewing an appointment viewing for me? Yes, because at least even if they lose, that's all I asked for this season. If they go 7-10, and this is the most fun football I have watched from the Jets, really outside of the 2009, 2010, and that Brandon Marshall Fitzmagic year, I'm in. I'm in for that. I don't need them to win every game this year. I don't need to see them make the postseason. Obviously, I would love to see that happen. Obviously, I want to see another 2009 AFC Championship run. But if they are just fun to watch every Sunday, that's a great season. That's a good kind of fan experience. So I'll go like a 4-1. I think that's probably where I fall. I still don't think they'll make the postseason, but Justin Fields is the greatest quarterback of all time. Garrett Wilson's the greatest receiver. Aaron Glenn's the greatest coach. And Jets are winning the Super Bowl this year.
You just said they weren't making the postseason. What's your record prediction?
7-10. I said it. I think they'll go 7-10. I think they'll be a really exciting team, and they'll be a hard out every Sunday. That's pretty much how I feel.
I mean, I would have to agree. I think I could see it flipping, though. I could see them being a 10-7 team.
They
got to shore up that secondary a little bit.
Yeah,
and they got to find another receiver.
That definitely. I do love Mason Taylor and Jeremy Ruckert. So tight end's going to be good.
Jeremy Ruckert, Long Island kid.
There you go. I knew it was coming. Anyways, I really like Mason Taylor. I love Garrett Wilson. Obviously, they need another receiver. Maybe trade for Chris Olave? ? Maybe
have Neighbors. Give us like your first overall pick.
Okay, I'm thinking Olave, and we just run the Ohio State Magic back of Fields with just all those guys. And then I also, the secondary's got to get short up. Brandon Stevens looks like the dumbest signing of all time. The guy is incredibly lengthy, freak athlete, but I don't think he could cover me in an IM flag football game with how he looked on Sunday. And I am serious about that. A.Z. Thomas, the defensive back from Florida State, he is my guy. I think he needs to be starting at corner. And Tony Adams should have been shot to the moon a year ago, but that doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. So every quarterback will probably have their best game of the season against the secondary and against everybody not named Sauce. But otherwise, Jets look like a great team. They're going to win the Super Bowl. I'm full of excitement and passion for this team, unlike you.
I'm telling you, ask me in 2 or 3 weeks how I'm feeling about these Giants, and I'm going to give a statement just like you did. But until Jackson Dart start, I don't care if you win with Russell Wilson this week or whenever. You've got one of the toughest schedules in the league, so I'm not expecting wins. So the point is, there's no playoff push for the Giants, but I will be just like you and a happy camper once Dart's in there, because at least we get to see what we have and whether we'll be drafting. I don't want to say Arch because Arch isn't going to pan out. I don't know who the Giants will draft. Drew Aller, he hasn't looked good. Cade Klubnik hasn't looked good. Nuss looked all right, but looked bad against Louisiana Tech.
DJ Lagway after he beats LSU weekend. Buy stock now. They're going to
Gators ain't winning.
By 2 touchdowns. Gators are winning it this weekend. Go to Locks and Long Shots to see why I think that. All right, we've already been at this for over an hour. Tomorrow,
hey, we've only got 36 minutes till we match what Locks and Long Shots did the other day.
Jesus. Tomorrow, very, very big day in the news world, obviously, with 9/11. Before we get into the playoff push, going to be a crazy day, I think, at the ballpark tomorrow. Beautiful ceremony. I'm already would bet the entire house on it for the Bronx tomorrow. 24-year anniversary of one of the most tragic days in not just New York history, but American history. So it's going to be a crazy day for me here in the state of New York covering that tomorrow. So we got to get out of here soon, but playoff push is on. Full-fledged at this point. Pretty much, I said this earlier, I think they're as close to a sure thing to make the postseason at this point, in my opinion. Whether they win the American League East, I really want to beat the Blue Jays, man. Listen, I get it. They've had a hell of a year. I get it. They have been a lot of fun to watch, and I really don't hold a lot of ill will to that entire crew out there in Toronto that's been calling these games. But taking these stupid-ass shots at the Yankees, man, if Michael Kay did it, they would have a firing squad all the way from
Montreal. They did have a firing squad. And he didn't even do it on the broadcast. He did it on his talk show.
I know, but I'm telling you, we will see some of these Toronto folks come up here with pitchforks and flamethrowers like you're going to do to the Giants and Joe Shane if they don't get rid of Russell Wilson. That's what they're going to do to Michael Kay if he were to say a comment like that. But the Blue Jays have just been talking all year long, and I want to see those filthy birds stay in Canada. I want the Yankees to win the American League East. I typically don't really put that much stock in it, to be quite honest with you. Obviously, would love to see them win the division, not have to play the Red Sox wild card round. But in my opinion, I want them to take out the Blue Jays. So, I mean, that's really where I'm at because we've already broken down everything else. Other than that, I still stand by my statement from 2 weeks ago. Jose Caballero should be the starting shortstop when we get into the playoffs. I stand by my statement. You still holding true to yours?
Look. I never said Anthony Volpe should. I never said he should be the starter. I said he's going to be the starter, and I still believe he will be the starter in the playoffs because Boone kind of hinted at it yesterday when he said Caballero still provides something else off the bench. I don't remember the exact quote, but paraphrased it was something like that.
You're right. Volpe will start. Somerset's got a very, very tough slate to end the season. In all seriousness, I agree with you. I think Volpe is going to end up being the starter, and I still haven't sold my Volpe stock. But the fact that the fact that we're here,
I never bought it.
About shopping him and all this stuff, it seems like this team is finally waking up to the fact that Volpe might have gotten rushed to the majors too soon, and he might have corrupted his development as a whole. But that's a story for a different episode. Just any final thoughts on the postseason push here? I mean, you see it on the ticker below. Blue Jays have kind of come back to life a little bit after the Yankees series. Red Sox still scare me the most of any team not named the Tigers in the American League. Rays, Orioles, don't expect them to be a fixture this year. Really still don't expect the Rays to be. But the Rangers would be the one team I wouldn't want to see in the postseason because they have a rotation that if they can get hot, scare me more than just about any team. But any parting thoughts on the playoff picture before we get out of here?
Oh, I'm back. I don't know what you said at the end. I lost my mic.
Parting thoughts on the playoff picture before we get out of here.
You hear me? I hope you can hear me, and I'm just going to talk.
I can hear you.
I can't hear you one bit, so this should be fun. For me, it comes down to the fact that you guys the Yankees have a lot of guys that are cold right now. Giancarlo Stanton is 4 for his last 34 over his last 11 games. Anthony Volpe's 2 for 20-something. Yet again, Ryan McMahon has been awful at the plate since the Yankees got him. And even when you throw in Jose Caballero, he really hasn't done much offensively outside of that strong start for him. So I do have a lot of concerns making this playoff push, but you're right. I'd love to kick the Blue Jays out of the playoffs, and I really don't want to see the Red Sox or Tigers. The wins against the Blue Jays in Houston, yeah, you should be able to beat those teams, especially with how Blue Jays have beaten up on you lately and how you've beaten up against Houston at Houston as of late. So that should continue to go just like it has. But I mean, you're about to lose game 2 of the series against the Tigers, which is going to mark it that the Tigers have a 2-0 lead in this series. I'm scared for Boston. I think they might get swept over the weekend. It just feels like this team doesn't have a signature. This is our moment that we turn everything around and we become the Yankees that we once were in April or May, as Rice goes and grounds into a double play after a leadoff single here. It just feels to me that if this team wants to make an actual push in the playoffs and not just a push to the playoffs, they need to start clicking in more ways than one. We talked about the bullpen. I mentioned some of the players that have been cold lately. I mean, it's just got to turn around. And I think this next stretch in terms of the final 2 innings of this game, plus tomorrow, plus the final, games against Boston, that is going to tell us whether this Yankee team will get out of round 1 of the playoffs or if they don't. At the moment, though, they're lined up to get to get a home series in that wild card series, and maybe that plays a factor. But honestly, I just don't know what to feel anymore. It feels kind of numb for this Yankees. Every time they do something good, they do something 10 times worse. 1 step forward, 2 steps back each time, and I'm not sure how much this playoff pushes into the playoffs.
Taking a look ahead for this Yankees team.
I can hear you again.
This conclusion of the series with the Tigers and then a monster series with the Red Sox this weekend. Again, just like you, Justin, I don't have a ton of hope that they will come out of that the victors, but I hope they do because that is the other team that I feel like
to the victors.
Detroit Tigers is going to be their kryptonite if they were to make the postseason. They beat up on the Twins pretty much every time they play them. They've got the White Sox in the final stretch of the season. Of their last games, I mean, after this Red Sox series, they really should lose maybe 2, 3, and that's just because they're resting guys at that point. They have maybe the easiest stretch to close the season with the Twins, Orioles. They have 6 games with the Orioles, 3 with the Twins, 3 with the White Sox, but the biggest games ahead, I think, before we get to the postseason are these next 4 after tonight. You have the Tigers twice, including the last inning and a half, 2 innings of tonight's game, and then Boston in Boston to round out the regular season for me, because after that, it's just see if everybody else struggles and you can somehow win the American League East, because those dirty birds from Toronto certainly shouldn't be the ones who win it. But Justin, any parting thoughts? I mean, you did just kind of give your monologue despite not knowing what the hell I asked you, which was, what do you think of the playoff picture? But I guess we kind of already broke that down. But regardless, Justin's giving you his outlook moving forward. Any parting thoughts before we get out of here?
I mean, go Yanks. Still going to be rooting for them. Going to be rooting for them to go far. Just win a couple games, please. And, obviously they're about to hit that 81 win mark. I mean, it seems like win 81's taking them a while, but we have a luxury here. Yankees haven't had a losing season in our lifetime, and unless the Yankees lose their final 18 games, we're not going to have a losing season this season either. So I'll take the winning, but you got to turn it on when it matters and against the teams that matter. And I don't know. It's looking bleak for me in October, but the good news, still look better than the New York Giants.
Off top of your head, do you remember our record predictions from the start of the season?
I was 81-81 on the dot. I remember mine. You, I think, were
a little bit more optimistic than that.
You were 86, I want to say, 87.
Not that I'm rooting for a poor end of the season,
but that could still hit.
Could still cash. Anyways,
I think 87 wins, it should still get you to the playoffs. You're thinking because unless the Rangers get hot,
you're hoping for high 80s, low 90s at this point, and who I just rattled off that they play to end the season. You got 6 games against the Orioles and 6 against teams that you have already whooped on. I think you realistically could get to 90 wins this season, and that wouldn't be an entire shock. But for Justin Chevalella, I'm Dylan Price. We're both saying let's go Yanks and hoping that they can pull off a final stretch of the season worth price of admission. Follow us on Instagram and X at Bomber Boys Pod. Subscribe to our YouTube at Bomber Boys Podcast. Follow us on Spotify, Bomber Boys podcast, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Listen, this is the stretch. This stretch of the season could define what the 2025 Yankees are made of. And if Aaron Judge, not Aaron Boone, Aaron Judge gets himself on that Mount Rushmore someday to tie it all back together. For Justin Chevalier, I'm Dylan Price. And do you want to share what's going on this weekend? They play Villanova. I don't think there's anything.
Penn State plays Villanova. Dylan canceled plans on me, but I get to go see my brother now instead. So it all works out. It all worked out in the end. I still am doing something this weekend.
For Justin Chevalier, I'm Dylan Price saying have a fantastic close off to your week and a great weekend ahead. And let's go, Yanks. Beat those dirty Boston folks.